Well, good afternoon, Strathcona County. I'm your Mayor, Rod Frank, and today I'm really pleased to be able to introduce for my virtual coffee, Pastor Jeff and Pastor Barry. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you.
And they're two very important leaders in our faith communities in Strathcona County. I wonder if Pastor Jeff and Pastor Barry, if you both could give a little bit of background on your roles and where you serve, and a little bit about your institutions.
Sure. So maybe I'll start. My name's Jeff Gullacher, as you said, and I'm the lead pastor at Trinity Baptist Church, one of the older congregations in town. Myself and Barry, we actually co-lead our local Ministerial, which is a combination of various Christian churches here in the county. So maybe I'll leave it at that, and Barry, you can introduce yourself too.
So my name is Barry Regier. I am a pastor at Heartland Alliance Church, and have been there, since the beginning of the church started about 15, 16 years ago, and have been on staff about 14 years now. That we've been in this community. And as Pastor Jeff was saying, we do represent the Christian churches within the community. And kind of the neat part is that on any given weekend, when we had services, we would have between 9 and 10,000 people gathering on a weekend. And so what the Ministerial represents are those people. And so how they're connected into church community, and into relationships and looking after their spiritual life. So it's a significant contingent from the county.
Yes. Well, when I think about what we're going through right now, it's hard to believe this started 3 weeks ago. To this day, it was 3 weeks ago when this really started to take off for us. And I know that the worship centers in our community were one of the early ones that were told, look, you can't have groups of more than 50, and now you're down to 15. So can you tell us a little bit about what this has meant for your church groups and also for your congregation, and maybe also for what you've seen in the wider community? Pastor Jeff?
I'll take a stab at it first. Sure, yeah. So obviously, like many other churches, we've had to shift online a whole bunch. I think we're pretty thankful, at least in our particular context, that we had been doing some online versions of our church service anyway for at least a few years. People travel and such, and so it's a good way for them to stay connected. So we didn't have to invent a whole lot of new equipment. But that said, now everybody is having to chime in. So our weekend services are online. A lot of our midweek programs, we've also done a little adaptation. And so there's stuff for kids and for teens that we do in various formats online. We have a weekday preschool, like some other churches in town. And actually our preschool teachers reinvented preschool and put that online as well. And other than that, I guess within our own context, something else that we've been doing, different churches will organize themselves internally different ways, but our church leaders have taken our entire church database and divvied it up. And once every couple of weeks or so, every single person that's connected to our church is getting a personal phone call just to check in on needs and such. We've got various helpers that have risen up through the ranks too that are helping out with some tangible things. As far as other things that I've heard of some other churches, depending upon the resources, I know that some of the smaller churches have just had to shut down altogether. They might even have to not host certain rental groups or other kind of social service groups that might be meeting in their locations. But a lot of us are in the same boat, just trying to figure out an online format and kind of going from there, leaning on that and email and phone and such.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Pastor Barry.
Well, and for us, I would agree. That's a lot of what I hear from other churches is they've gone online, they're connecting with their people whenever and however they can, and each church does do that differently. For us at Heartland, we are a small group church, so we are a church that has not only our weekend services where we connect in a large group setting, but we also are a small group church and we connect in a small group setting. So we have about 1,700 people connecting in 190 groups throughout our ministry year. And so for us, even though we as well have gone online for our weekend services, what we're finding is that our people are connecting really well with each other in small group, and they're doing it online. A lot of them are Zoom or some other online platform, whether they're just connecting with each other and seeing how they're doing and supporting and praying for each other, or they're actually going through a study, whether that is on a weekend from the weekend service or an own study that they've been going through anyway. But we find them connecting well. It's a new format, a new way of doing community that, quite frankly, none of us are used to doing. But we're really finding that our people are enjoying it, and they're connecting well, doing the best that we can during this time. We're also communicating with our people via email blast to everybody, as well as various kind of Zoom meetings that we're doing. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, our children's ministry is communicating with the kids and with their parents, giving them things to do, times to read together, things to focus on. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, our youth ministry is connecting with the teenagers that we minister to and their families. I know that my own kids are involved in kind of the daily challenges that they're doing with each other, and they're having a lot of fun with it. And so, and then besides our small groups, we're also really, personally, I'm concerned about the marriages. At times like this, marriages can be either go to the positive because now you're rekindling love, you're rekindling a relationship, and you realize why, you enjoyed this person in the first place, why you fell in love with them, for those of us who are married. And it can also be a time when it actually does the opposite. It blows you out when all you have to do is fight, and you can't get by that. So being very intentional with our small groups, our small group leaders, to connect with the people, to do a checkup on the marriages. How are you doing? And I'm in conversation right now with 2 marriages that, quite frankly, aren't doing very well. This time has this current levels of stress is creating cracks in their relationship. So, but I'm thankful for the community. This is, I think, one of the benefits of being involved in the church community is that you've got people around you that you can walk honestly with, and you can share some of these challenges and these struggles, and you can gain that kind of support. So that's some of the things that we've seen here.
Okay, well, it's heartening to hear that both of your churches seem to be a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of dealing with technology, but still, there's no doubt that you're scrambling in some areas, I'm sure. And it's interesting what you're saying now about the different pressure points being put on families. So in my role, of course, I think about public health, and then I think about economics. And you pastors have to think about people's spiritual health. So you've already highlighted some of the problems we have. Sometimes familiarity can breed contempt, perhaps. I'm not sure, but first of all, although you're up on technology, I know sometimes I want to speak to people face to face. If I'm talking to my spiritual advisors, I have to see them sometimes. How are you dealing with that? And also these specific examples you're giving about families under stress. What's the advice on that?
Yeah, good question. As far as getting together with people, I really resonate with your comment about just a desire to be face to face. I think that's a very human instinct. Obviously, we all got to do our part with public health, and we do need to do the social distancing thing. I don't think there's any benefit in us trying to bend those rules at all. I've heard of churches elsewhere in a certain U.S. state that maybe I won't name that are bending those rules, and that's just not what we should be about. That said, I think we just got to go with what we can with video conferencing with people. I've done various meetings with people, even one-on-one that way. There's phone calls that, of course, you can do and such. Maybe more to Barry's comment about marital stress. Obviously, there's stresses that involve parents as well. Siblings will start to fight like cats and dogs after the days go by here. I think we're all probably hoping that with school starting again next week, maybe that will give kids a little bit of needed and good distraction. I think where I would probably go with some comments about just family dynamics that way is, it's a time for people to really examine their roots. I think when we are in our non-COVID kind of time of life, we can mask certain problems with really overstretched schedules and a whole bunch of other activities that just deflect us from what's perhaps really going on within our own marriages and families. And those masks have now been taken away. So if anything, before we get rebuilt, I think it's a matter of people facing their shadows, so to speak, and becoming as brutally honest as they can with where they're at and how they've got there. I don't think Barry and I are either necessarily trained counselors per se, but spiritually as pastors, I think we would want to help people kind of figure out how they got to rock bottom, and then help them perhaps then turn towards God and open themselves up to Him and to His power and His grace to be able to work inside of us and change us from the inside out. I wouldn't worry too much necessarily about some of the little strategies that you can find on a whole host of articles that people put on the internet. I mean, those things can be okay, but in some ways they're window dressing to the core issues that are actually underneath.
And I would agree with a lot of that. At Heartland, we're not doing a lot of face-to-face, Mayor. We're just not connecting that way. Don't think that's a good idea to be a good community member. And so we're doing a lot of FaceTime and Zoom, that kind of thing. The face-to-face just isn't working well right now. And with the stress and anxiety that a lot of parents and homes are experiencing, one of the values of connecting in community for such a time as this is that when those stress levels rise, then you've got some people that you can go to and you can express. And as pastors, as Pastor Jeff was saying, we are available to connect with them. One of the things we've been very intentional at Heartland is to equip our small group leaders to be lay pastors. And so our first level of care, our primary care network, starts in our small groups. They are lay pastors for us. And so being connected into community like that, we're a place where you can be honest, like Pastor Jeff was saying, and get to the bottom of some of the issues, what might be going on underneath the surface. This is a good time to do that, because very often it's in this kind of times of stress that those cracks are revealed. Mm-hmm. So let's not ignore those things, but let's go after them and explore them. And if someone doesn't have a faith background or hasn't really been concerned much about spirituality, well, now's the time to start thinking about some of these things. What role might God play in some of these stressors? What role might Jesus want to have in ministering to these issues that are beneath the surface for us? So we just really want to encourage our people. I am concerned for people in the community who don't have a network of support like that, of friends who they can call, they can connect on some kind of social media and share their struggles and have people pray for them if they're okay with that. Like, I'm concerned about those. And so even one of the things that we've done at Heartland is right on our homepage is putting on the opportunity there for people to say, I am in need, I have a need, or I can help. And so we don't want anybody falling through the cracks. Yeah. And it's just a way that as a church, and as I think as a collection of evangelical churches around this community, that we can minister to people who right now are struggling but don't have that connect.
Yeah. I want to thank both of your churches for adhering to Alberta healthcare standards in terms of physical distancing, because that's fundamentally important. But I'm also hearing that you're still there for the faith community that you represent, and I'm sure you're there for the wider community. As you mentioned, there's some people at risk here that don't have a faith community. I'm heartened to hear that it's normal for people to feel stressed. We're in a different situation. This is a traumatic event, and I think we can still depend upon our spiritual leaders, like both Pastor Jeff and Pastor Barry. So before we sign off, I want to thank you again for being leaders in the community, and maybe you just want to give some spiritual advice to your flocks and to Strathcona County before we get off the air here.
Sure. Maybe I'll start a little bit with a story. So something that we did, and I know some other churches have been doing, we had a little sample letter that we distributed to our congregants, and it's a letter that they could print off and put into the mailboxes of the immediate neighbors around them. And the letter basically goes something like, hey, I don't know if I've met you yet, but I just want to let you know I'm here to help if you need anything. So we kind of did that, but in our own family, we tried to lead by example. And our kids went out with cookies and with soup a little later on and delivered them to some of the seniors that live right around our own house. And one of the seniors talked to them and basically said, hey, in the 3 years that we've lived in this neighborhood, you're the first person to ring our doorbell who's not trying to sell something. And that was a good wake-up call, actually. So definitely, whether you're a part of a faith community or not, I think this is a time for us all, again, using social distancing, to really check in on each other. It's not something that any one organization or institution can really mastermind. It's going to require the organic cooperation and involvement and initiative of everybody. I think I'd probably echo a little bit of what Barry was saying. I too have a concern for people that don't have networks, though. And maybe my encouragement, I think, especially to those who are not part of a faith community, because so many churches are going online right now, might be a way to just check out some of your own spiritual interests and intuitions. Find a church that's online here in the neighborhood and watch their services and watch their programming that they might have. It's a way to do that that's perhaps a little bit anonymous and you don't have to feel too nervous doing it, but it's kind of a good first step to perhaps reigniting some of your own spiritual needs and see where that goes. Maybe another comment that I'd make, I mean, some people probably know a spiritual person that lives on their block. Maybe you kind of think that they're a little bit weird, but maybe it's time to put some of that aside and just connect with them, say hello to them, get to know their needs a little bit, because standing behind that person is probably a whole faith community that has more resources than any one particular family might have. And that could be a great help to people who are rather lonely.
Great.
So this is something that we've been doing as well. We've been encouraging our people to connect with their neighbors. I like that letter idea when Jeff had presented that early on in this process, and we fired that out actually to all of the Ministerial as a suggestion, as an idea of a way for each of us and each of our churches to be ministering to our neighbors. So even for me personally, I've been in contact with my neighbors in our cul-de-sac. Many of them are older. Many of them, have some needs in that way. One conversation is literally with my next door neighbor, and I was asking him how he is doing, how his wife is doing, and she is now in a long-term care facility because of cancer and not coming home. And so some of his own sadness, this has just happened recently. But I was asking him, so how do you feel about yourself in this? And, are you worried? Are you, what's your anxiety level like, knowing his age and knowing kind of his situation? He goes, he says in his thick Eastern European accent, he says, Barry, I'm not concerned about me. I've lived my life. It's been a good life. And he says, I know where I'm going after I die, after this is done. So if this COVID takes me, I'm okay.
Yeah.
And so it was just a neat conversation.
Yeah.
But I guess, as a parting comment, then I say, do we know we are all spiritual beings? We can't get away from that. As much as we're social and intellectual and emotional and physical, all of these things, spiritual is a part of who we are. So what are we doing to nurture that part of our life? Have we been asking these questions about what happens after we die, our own mortality? And so I would say this is a good time for us to be exploring some of these things. And like Pastor Jeff said, you can connect with a local church online. You can just kind of go through the directory and find some of us there. Sorry, directory is a really old term, but you can Google us.
You could
How's
maybe
that for a
they're in
throwback?
a Rolodex or something. I don't know.
Don't worry. I recently hit 60, and I've been taking lots of flack for my senior moments, so I know where you're at there.
Well, and frankly, we are, it's one thing to engage with a church online or a faith community online. It's another thing to actually get connected. But just to encourage people, we've been connecting people into small group all the way through this process, even over these last 3 weeks that we can't meet on weekend services and our small groups aren't meeting in person, they're meeting online. We're still connecting people in group. Yep. And so there's always ways to get connected, and each website, each church would have their own ways of responding. So I just encourage you, take this, don't waste this time to ask some of the deeper, more significant questions in this life. What does God have to do with all this, and how can we connect with him?
Okay, well, thank you once again, Pastor Jeff and Pastor Barry. Our community is in great shape because of leaders like you, and thank you so much. I want to direct everybody to strathcona.ca/COVID-19 for up-to-date information from the municipalities. And let's just end with both you gentlemen. Perhaps you can give a shout out to your web pages or where people should be going to speak to you.
Sure. So Trinity Baptist Church has a social media handle and our website as well. It's tbcsherwoodpark.ca. So that'd be our website. We're on Facebook. We're also on Instagram. I think we're now on YouTube as well.
For Heartland, it's heartlandalliance.ca, and we are on all the social media as well, and all of those links are available there right off our website.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking time out of your busy days. I'll let you get on with them, and we'll talk again.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Good to connect with you.
All right.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.